As the fading daylight bathed Miller's pub in golden hues, its aged wooden surfaces and faded photographs seemed to glow softly. Behind the counter, Ellena Miller, a woman in her early 30s with dark hair tied back in a practical ponytail, worked with practiced efficiency. Her hands, hardened by years of labor, moved methodically across the bar, the faint squeak of her cleaning cloth echoing in the otherwise silent space. Elena's thoughts wandered as her hands worked, slipping into the familiar routine she had grown so used to. The pub, a cherished legacy that had been in her family for generations, now rested squarely on her shoulders. With her father's health in decline, she had taken on the responsibility of running it, a duty she carried out without complaint, driven by love and an unwavering sense of obligation. After finishing at the bar, Ellena made her way toward a small, tucked-away room at the back of the pub. Pausing in the doorway, she took a moment to compose herself before stepping inside. The dimly lit room was dominated by a hospital-style bed, where her father, Frank Miller, lay resting. The steady hiss of his oxygen canister filled the space, providing a constant background hum. "Dad," she called softly, stepping closer. "How are you feeling?" Frank's eyes fluttered open, and a faint smile played across his weathered face at the sight of his daughter. He hadn't been able to speak for months now, but his gaze still radiated the warmth and strength that had always defined him. His fingers twitched slightly, gesturing toward the wheelchair positioned nearby. "Ready to get up, huh?" Ellena said, her voice gentle yet touched with forced cheer. "All right then, let's get you settled. It's almost time to open." With care and precision, Ellena helped her father from the bed to the wheelchair. Though his once strong frame had been weakened by illness, there was still a quiet determination in him. He did what little he could to assist her, despite his limitations. Once settled, Ellena carefully adjusted the oxygen tubes and wheeled him into the main pub area. She positioned him behind the cash register, a spot he had occupied for decades. Even in his diminished state, being there seemed to bring him a measure of comfort. "There we go," Ellena said, placing a small bell within his reach. "You've been relying on that grunt of yours for years, Dad, but I think the bell might make things easier. Just one ring for yes, two for no, all right." Frank raised his eyebrows slightly, his subtle acknowledgement accompanied by his usual soft grunt. With a fond smile, Ellena rolled her eyes, deciding not to press the matter. She knew he'd stick to his preferred method of communication, be it the bell or his grunt. Over the years, she'd become fluent in his unique, subtle language. Turning her attention to the pub, Ellena began her usual opening routine. With the ease of long familiarity, she flipped the sign on the door from closed to open, swapped out the receipt paper in the register, and organized the small change. As she moved, she kept up a light-hearted commentary, mostly for herself. "Looks like it might be a slow night," she said, glancing out the window at the empty street. "But who knows? We might get a surprise or two." Frank's raised eyebrows and quiet grunt seemed to agree. Ellena paused, smiling gently at him. "How about some dinner, Dad? Ready for your porridge?" One raised eyebrow, one grunt. "Yes." Ellena nodded and headed to the small kitchenette behind the bar. She quickly prepared a milk porridge in a plastic cup, stirring as her thoughts drifted. She remembered the pub's livelier days, when her father's booming laugh would fill the room, blending with the clinking of glasses and the lively hum of conversation. Now, those memories felt like echoes of a distant past, replaced by the quiet rhythm of caregiving and the ever-present worry that weighed on her mind. Pushing those thoughts aside, she returned with the porridge and patiently helped her father take slow sips through a straw. They fell into an unhurried rhythm, with Ellena filling the silence with gentle chatter about her day. Halfway through the meal, the soft chime of the doorbell broke the quiet. Ellena glanced up, her welcoming smile instinctively in place. However, as her eyes landed on the figure entering the pub, her smile faltered, replaced by shock. Standing in the doorway was a tall, bald man clad in a black leather jacket and jeans, a face she had seen countless times on TV and movie posters. It was Jason Statham. For a moment, Ellena froze, blinking as though to dispel an illusion. But there he was, moving with quiet purpose toward a shadowed corner near the window. Elena's heart raced as she set down the porridge cup and exchanged a wide-eyed glance with her father. Frank's faintly raised eyebrows and amused expression reflected her own disbelief. Taking a steadying breath, Ellena smoothed her apron and approached the table, determined to remain professional. "Good evening, sir," she said, proud of the steadiness in her voice. "Welcome to Miller's Pub. What can I get you?" Jason looked up, a tired smile crossing his familiar features. "Evening," he replied, his gravelly voice unmistakable. "I'll have a pint of your best." "Coming right up," Ellena said, jotting the order out of habit before retreating to the bar. As she poured the beer, her thoughts raced. What could have brought Jason Statham to their quiet, out-of-the-way pub? Was he filming nearby? Lost on his way to a more glamorous destination? Pushing her curiosity aside, she focused on the task at hand. When she returned to his table, she set the pint down carefully. "Here you go, sir. Let me know if you need anything else." Jason nodded in thanks, and Ellena left him to his solitude. She sensed he was seeking peace, and she intended to respect that, even as her curiosity gnawed at her. Back behind the bar, she couldn't resist sneaking glances at their famous guest. The quiet weariness in his posture stirred her imagination, making her wonder what burdens a life of fame might bring. Jason's eyes flickered momentarily to the scene, observing with a blend of curiosity and concern. His posture straightened, the casual air from moments before replaced by an alert demeanor. Ellena silently hoped he wouldn't intervene. Regardless of his status, she didn't want him tangled up in the storm that was brewing. The leader of the bikers, a man she only knew as Iron, strode toward the table with deliberate calm. Each movement was precise and unhurried, exuding an air of authority that made it clear no one would dare rush him. He approached the open sign hanging by the window, casually flipping it to closed. With a flick of his wrist, he reached for the key she now regretted leaving so accessible and locked the door with a decisive click. The sound of the lock engaging echoed ominously through the pub, sending a shiver down Elena's spine. They were now isolated, cut off from the outside world. Whatever was about to unfold would happen within these four walls, uninterrupted. Turning from the door, Iron scanned the pub's emptiness, his gaze sweeping over the room. Jason, tucked in the shadowy corner, went unnoticed, dismissed as an unremarkable regular. Iron's focus quickly shifted to Ellena, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face. Well, he drawled, his voice a low rumble that reverberated through the wooden floor. "Looks like it's payday, boys." He dropped into a nearby chair, sprawling as if he owned the place. With a tilt of his head, he motioned to his companions. "Handle it," he commanded, his tone carrying an unspoken threat. The two bikers approached the bar in synchronized steps, their presence menacing. Ellena stood firm, forcing herself to maintain eye contact despite the unease twisting her insides. "We're here to see your father," one of them said, his voice sharp. A scar stretched down his left cheek, adding to his menacing appearance. "Frank needs to settle up." Swallowing hard, Ellena steadied herself. "That's not possible," she replied, gesturing toward her father's wheelchair. "He's not in any condition to deal with business matters." The scarred biker's lips curled into a sneer. "Not our problem, sweetheart. Your old man borrowed money for all that medical gear and oxygen. Now it's time to pay up. And let's not forget those protection fees. You're 3 months behind." Elena's heart pounded as she tried to think of a solution. She knew they didn't have the money these men wanted. The pub had been barely scraping by for months, every spare cent funneled into her father's medical expenses. "Listen," she began, her tone trembling but earnest. "I know we owe you, but things have been hard. The pub's struggling, and with my father's condition." Her voice faltered as the second biker, a bald man with tattoos crawling up his neck, chuckled darkly. "Tough luck, girl. Doesn't change anything. Iron's been patient, but that patience is wearing thin." Her chest tightened as she glanced toward the back room where her father rested, her mind racing with worry. She clenched her fists and turned back to the bikers. I can give you what's in the register, she offered, her voice tinged with desperation. It's not much, but it's all we've got. The scarred biker exchanged a glance with his companion before shrugging. Show us, he demanded. With trembling hands, Ellena opened the cash register and pulled out the meager stack of bills, placing them on the bar. This is everything, she said softly, her voice barely audible. The bald biker snatched up the money, quickly thumbing through it before scowling. This doesn't even come close to what you owe, he spat. It's all we have, Ellena insisted, her voice rising. Please, you have to understand. We're doing everything we can. Leaning over the bar, the scarred biker brought his face close to hers, the acrid scent of stale cigarettes on his breath. Maybe you're not listening, he said coldly. This isn't a negotiation. Pay up, or there will be consequences. Tears welled in Elena's eyes, but she blinked them away, unwilling to give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. I've told you, she said, her voice steadier now, fueled by defiance. This is all we have. Take it or leave it. Iron, who had been silently observing from his seat, finally rose with a loud scrape of his chair against the floor. Enough, he growled. Mitch, Daryl, check the back room. There's got to be more somewhere. Panic flared in Elena's chest. The back room wasn't just her father's sanctuary, it was where they kept their last few valuables. No, she shouted, stepping in front of the door. You can't go back there. He's resting. Please, I'm telling you the truth. There's nothing else. Iron loomed over her, his bulk intimidating. He grabbed her wrist with a crushing grip, yanking her away from the door. Step aside, he ordered, his voice like steel. With a nod, he directed his men. Go. The bikers brushed past her, their footsteps heavy with purpose as they disappeared into the back room. Ellena struggled against Iron's hold, her smaller frame futile against his strength. Ellena walked toward the cleaning closet, clinging to the familiarity of her routine as a small comfort amid the chaos of the night. She slipped her cleaning outfit over her clothes, the well-worn fabric serving as a shield against the uncertainty surrounding her. With a mop, bucket, and floor brush in hand, she headed for the bathroom. Cleaning offered a sense of control, a way to restore order in a situation that felt increasingly out of her grasp. When she pushed open the bathroom door, the fluorescent lights flickered to life, their harsh glare casting stark shadows across the tiles. She began scrubbing at invisible stains with an intensity born from frustration and fear. The rhythmic brushing of the tiles became almost therapeutic, a temporary escape from the overwhelming stress. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice the bathroom door creak open until voices disrupted the quiet. Iron's still in there with the old man. Mitch's gravelly tone pierced the silence. I don't get what he thinks he's going to get out of him. You know Iron, Daryl replied casually. He's all about the long game. He figures if he breaks the old man, we'll have a steady income for years to come. Ellena froze, her brush hovering over the floor. Tucked away in one of the stalls, she stayed perfectly still, straining to catch every word. Yeah, but what's the point? Mitch muttered in irritation. That old man can't even talk or move. How's he supposed to pay us? Daryl chuckled, though there was no humor in the sound. It's not about him, he said coolly. It's about her, the daughter. She'll do anything to protect her dad. That's where the real money is. Elena's heart sank at his words. She had always suspected she was their true target, but hearing it said aloud left her feeling sick. I guess, Mitch grumbled reluctantly. Still, this feels like a waste of time. We could just take what we want and be done with it. Would save us a lot of trouble. And that's why Iron's in charge, and you're not, Daryl retorted with a mocking edge. If we start robbing every place in town, it won't be long before the cops are on us. This way, we keep the money flowing, and nobody dares to talk. It's good business. Their cold, calculated discussion made Elena's chest tighten. This wasn't random thuggery, but a deliberate, exploitative operation. The realization left her feeling trapped and powerless. She was so consumed by her thoughts that she didn't realize she had gasped softly until the sound broke the silence. Well, Mitch said, his voice taking on a predatory tone. What do we have here? a little damsel hiding in the toilet. Ellena stepped out of the stall, forcing herself to meet their gazes despite the fear coursing through her. "She's got guts," Mitch remarked, smirking. Without warning, he kicked over her cleaning bucket, sending dirty water spilling across the floor. The two men laughed, stomping through the puddle and splashing her shoes on purpose. Their mocking behavior only heightened her humiliation, but she clenched her jaw, determined not to let them see her break. Inside, though, she was unraveling. The fear for her father, the frustration of the night, and now this deliberate cruelty were becoming too much to bear. Tears welled in her eyes, and before she could stop them, she turned and fled the bathroom, their cruel laughter echoing behind her. She stumbled into the corridor, sinking to the floor with her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. She tried to stifle her sobs, but the weight of her emotions was too heavy to contain. What had started as an ordinary evening had become a nightmare. As she sat there, trembling, she could only hope for it to end. But the night was far from over, and the worst was still to come. Ellena halted mid-step, her heart lodging in her throat as the sound of heavy boots and authoritative voices filled the air. Then came the unmistakable shout, "Police! Everyone, freeze!" Moments later, several officers stormed into the bathroom with weapons drawn, quickly assessing the scene, Iron and Mitch groaning on the floor, Jason standing protectively near Ellena, and Daryl hesitating in the doorway. "It's okay," Jason said, slowly raising his hands. "I'm Jason Stam. These men were attacking this young woman and her father. We've restrained them, but there may be more suspects in the back room." For a brief moment, the officers seemed taken aback by the Hollywood star's presence, but they quickly regained their composure. Two officers moved to handcuff Iron and Mitch, while another approached Jason and Ellena. "Miss, are you all right?" the officer asked, his tone calm yet firm. Ellena nodded, struggling to hold back tears of relief. "My father," she whispered. "He's in the back room. Please, he needs help." The officer gave a quick nod and radioed for medical assistance. Paramedics soon arrived, heading straight to the back room, while Ellena was gently led out of the bathroom into the pub's main area. The sight that greeted her was a flurry of organized activity, officers securing the scene and taking statements while paramedics hurried to her father. Jason stayed close by Elena's side until they were approached by a detective. "Detective Sarah Thompson," the woman introduced herself. "I know this has been a harrowing experience, but we need to take your statements while the details are still fresh." Over the next hour, Ellena and Jason provided thorough accounts of the evening's events. Ellena recounted months of threats and extortion from Iron and his gang, while Jason corroborated her story with his own account of the night's events. His celebrity status only added credibility to their testimony. As she spoke, Ellena couldn't help glancing anxiously toward the back room, her heart tight with worry. At last, the paramedics emerged, wheeling her father into the main area. Relief washed over her as she rushed to his side, her heart lifting when she saw he was conscious and alert in his wheelchair. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking as she took his hand. Frank's eyes met hers, a blend of relief and concern evident in his gaze. He didn't need words. The gentle squeeze of her hand said it all. A paramedic approached Ellena and spoke gently. "Your father seems stable," he said. "There's no need for a hospital visit right now, but we've noticed his oxygen canister is running low. You'll want to replace it soon to ensure his comfort." Ellena nodded, the weight on her chest easing slightly. "Thank you," she said, already planning to handle it as soon as possible. "Is there anything else we should do?" "Just keep an eye on him," the paramedic replied. "If anything changes, don't hesitate to call us." Ellena turned to her father, studying his face intently. "Are you feeling okay, Dad?" she asked quietly. Frank raised his eyebrows in his usual gesture of affirmation and let out a soft grunt. His tired but warm eyes gave her all the reassurance she needed. Without speaking, they exchanged a moment of silent understanding, one built over years of closeness. After making sure her father was settled, Ellena realized she hadn't seen Jason for a while. She stepped outside to thank him properly, only to find his car gone and just a handful of officers and investigators remaining at the scene. It was as if Jason had disappeared into thin air, leaving no sign of his presence other than the profound impact he'd had on their lives. Ellena felt a wave of gratitude mixed with disappointment that she hadn't been able to thank him in person. As she turned back to the pub, her eyes caught sight of something on the bartender's table, a letter. Her heart raced as she walked over to it. Though Jason was gone, he had clearly left one last gesture behind. With slightly trembling hands, Ellena picked up the envelope, knowing that whatever it contained would once again change everything. She opened it with a deep breath. Inside was a letter and a check. Her eyes widened as she saw the amount. It was enough to cover her father's medical bills and the pub's expenses for months. Hands shaking slightly, she unfolded the letter and began reading. Dear Ellena, you no longer have to live in fear. Use this money to pay for your father's medical care and to rebuild the pub. What you and your father have endured is more than anyone should ever have to face. Consider this a small way to set things right. I'll visit again next time I'm in town. Take care of yourself and your father. Sincerely, Jason Stam. Tears filled Elena's eyes as she finished the letter. The sheer generosity of the gesture overwhelmed her, and she clutched the letter to her chest, letting the emotions of the night flow freely. She turned to her father, who was seated in his wheelchair near the cash register. Kneeling beside him, she showed him the letter and explained Jason's gift. As she spoke, understanding lit up Frank's face. His rare smile appeared, and he gave a soft grunt of approval, his way of expressing immense gratitude. No words were necessary. The moment spoke volumes. Ellena squeezed his hand gently, their shared relief washing away months of fear and hardship. That night, after settling her father into bed, Ellena lingered at his bedside. Adjusting his oxygen mask, she whispered, I'll replace this tomorrow, Dad. And we should schedule a checkup soon, just to make sure everything's okay. Frank gave his characteristic nod and a soft pat of her hand. Ellena sat for a moment, reflecting on the day. What a day it's been, she murmured. Those men, what they did to us, to this community, it felt like we'd never be free. And then Jason shows up and changes everything. Frank grunted softly, encouraging her to continue. We were so close to losing it all, Ellena continued, her voice barely audible. But we didn't. We're still here. And now, with Jason's help, we can rebuild. We can get you better treatment and finally fix up the pub the way we've always wanted. Frank's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and he squeezed her hand tightly. Leaning down, Ellena kissed his forehead. Rest now, Dad. Tomorrow's a new day, and we've got so much to look forward to. As she left the room, she closed the door softly behind her and leaned against it, exhaling deeply. The pub was quiet, but for the first time in months, it wasn't weighed down by fear. Ellena felt hope, a bright, undeniable hope for the future. Miller's pub had endured the storm, and when it reopened, it would be stronger than ever, a testament to the strength of a father and daughter who refused to give up.